Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. All right, welcome in. I'm going to do a solo podcast for about 15 or 20 minutes. As you know, I took a long break, for me a long break, longest break of my career while I was under contract, 17 days. A lot of it was FS1 management came to me about 6 months ago and said, you're going to get knocked off the air because of the Euros and Copa, about 75% of your shows. So go take 15 days off. And I decided to. I have a place out in Rhode Island, hung out near the beach with my wife. Daughter was out there for a while. Good friends from Los Angeles stopped by. We have really good friends out in Rhode Island. And it's my favorite little hiding place in America is in a small little town in Rhode Island. And I go on these long walks on the beach every day by myself. Sometimes I put in a podcast, the earbuds, and sometimes I just talk to myself in the fog in the morning, dogs everywhere. So it gave me a lot of time to think about a lot of things. First of all, I want to talk about Gregg Berhalter just got relieved of his duties as the coach of the United States men's national team. And, I've come to the realization, two things about soccer fans in America. Number one, they have been ignored, right, compared to football, basketball, baseball for years. So they have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. They're not really interested in you joining the club. And for guys like me who are traditionalists with the main sports, it's very hard to get the VIP pass code to be let in. You're always having to prove your worth. Baseball fans become a little like this since baseball over the last 20 years has lost so much of its social currency. It's just not talked about like it used to be at the water cooler. And so if you ever have an opinion about soccer, you're an outsider, and unless you're going to the matches and, you have to prove your worth constantly. Here's all I know about Gregg Berhalter. 69% winning percentage, which is the highest winning percentage of any United States men's national team coach that has coached at least 20 games. And remember, this is a guy that got a draw in the last World Cup to the final field of 16 with none of his top players in their prime. None. He had players getting close to their prime. Pulisic now is just entering his prime. But people will say, well, he's got more talent than ever. If you look at every sport, including soccer in the world, you win championships when you have an overwhelming majority of your best players in their prime. Chris Jones, Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce was middle to late prime when they started this run. That's the way it goes, right? Like, that's not to say you can't have players like a Brady who is older, a Gronk who is older. They have playoff experience. But generally, sports all work the same way. I mean, the Boston Celtics, Tatum in his prime, Jaylen Brown in his prime, Derek White in his prime. Porzingis actually in his prime, although he misses a lot of time. Drew Holiday out of his prime. Horford out of his prime. But their top three players are arguably all in their prime. You know, when Denver won their championship, Jokic prime, Murray prime, Porter prime, Gordon prime, KCP a little out of his prime, a little older. So the United States men's national team is the most skillful we've ever had. But this World Cup will be the first World Cup where we have a majority of our best players at the beginning of their prime. It's still a really young team. So go ahead, get rid of Gregg Berhalter. But one of the reasons I've been critical of the United States men's national team fans is because they always blame the coach. It doesn't matter who it is. Jurgen Klinsmann, Bruce Arena, it's always blame the coach. It's always the coach's fault. And the reality is this country has played mostly defensive and safe soccer most of my life because we have to. If we're hyper aggressive against Argentina or Germany, the Netherlands, England, we get roasted. I think for the first time ever in the next 2 years, this World Cup team will have the ability to play top teams, England, and be equally aggressive. I think our skill is that good. The Copa performance was disappointing. I think we're better than most of the teams in Copa. So I understand the disillusioned fan base. I get it. But just know 69% of the matches with a mostly overwhelmingly young roster just entering their prime, just over the next year to two entering their prime, I thought he was pretty good. I did think Copa was disappointing. Two things can be true. So Gregg Berhalter is gone. Something else I think about is the NBA has finalized their deal with ESPN, NBC, and Amazon to get $76 million over 11 years. And listen, it's like people that overreacted to Bronny James going to the Lakers. You don't like LeBron. I get it. I'm not looking for you to be honest. TNT has 5 days to match. I think the most interesting part of the NBA deal isn't ESPN, NBC, or Amazon. It's TNT, who has, again, about a week to match, or their 40-year relationship is over. So let me tell you, let's say you run TNT. I'm a consumer, and I think I'm your typical sports consumer. If you let the NBA go, I can just tell you I'll never watch TNT again. It'll just be one of those things I scroll past. That's the only reason I watch TNT. And the Kenny Smith, Barkley, Shaq, Ernie show, I watch an hour before the games start. And I'll often stay 30 minutes after the games are over if I'm not doing a podcast. So no NBA. I'm not watching for the Western Conference Finals of the NHL because the Stanley Cup I'll watch. ESPN's got that. I'm not watching for, an occasional early round baseball playoff series. Fox has the World Series. I'm not watching TNT. So if you ran TNT, would you rather sign the deal, keep me as a consumer, though you lose money on the deal, but you keep me watching your shoulder programming, your pregame show, your postgame show, seeing all sorts of ads, promotions for other shows during your NBA coverage, or lose me completely as a consumer? That's the decision TNT has. They're not going to make money on this deal. But you sign the deal to be able to promote other shows, try to expand how often I, as a consumer, am watching. Because I'm not going to watch TNT. It's over. I'm not watching for Mountain West football and early round baseball playoff series. It's over. I'm done as a consumer. And so, it's very easy to say, well, they're going to lose money. All these networks are going to lose money on the NBA. ESPN, because they're a current rights holder, doesn't have to market and promote the NBA as a new rights holder. NBC and Amazon have to go out and spend so much money on marketing, promotion, hiring remote crews to ramp up, like overspend early to pull in new audience. ESPN's got me. I know where the NBA is. So they have the benefit of being a current rights holder, an incumbent, if you will, in the political business. They're an incumbent. So I know what to expect. Don't have to love their coverage all the time. Love Mike Breen. Don't love most of the coverage, but I know what to expect, and I know where they're on my TV or my phone, right? And so that's the decision. That's why it's difficult. So ESPN does it because it's tonnage. It fills space. They can promote other shows, other leagues, other whatever. And they can use NBA highlights, and they can put it on Scott Van Pelt after the games, and it helps so many ancillary parts of the coverage. That's an easy one for ESPN. But for TNT, they don't have me for anything other than that. And if they don't sign it, they lose me completely as a consumer. So I think these decisions are much more difficult than people think. Are you willing to sign up for something that you know is not going to be profitable? But I at least keep you as a consumer. And maybe over the course of time, I can move you into another show. I can move you into other platforms that I'm connected to. That's the trick in it. All right, forget what the calendar says. The football season actually, to me, starts Saturday. The Baltimore Ravens open their camp for the rookies. DraftKings has a best ball millionaire contest. It is the biggest fantasy contest ever. We're talking 15 million guaranteed dollars in the prize pool. 15 million from DraftKings. That's a big number. with two millionaires being crowned for first and second place. That is life-changing. If you're a set it and forget it type, then best ball is for you. No waiver wires, no roster management, bigger rosters so injuries won't end your season, only the draft, and that's it. You are set for the season. I like that, right? So you can play it and have a life too. Check it out. This year, DraftKings offering everyone a draft one, get one special. Everybody gets this. Your $20 entry fee, that's it, $20, scores you a bonus ticket. So get ready for the best ball week at DraftKings. Download the DraftKings app. Takes 90 seconds. Put in the code Colin. That's me, Colin. All customers who enter NFL Best Ball 15 million millionaire contest get a bonus ticket. Only during Best Ball week, only on DraftKings. Listen, the NBA has challenges. It's getting very European. Okay? And when you're international and you don't introduce consumers to players until they reach the professional level, it's a disadvantage. And something I've been on for years, and you know this if you're honest, I have been banging on Adam Silver for years, who considers college basketball the enemy. The NFL understands the value of college football, is that if you're only introducing fans to players, new players, once they arrive to the NBA, it's a huge, huge disadvantage. College football introduces you to an Ohio State wide receiver for 3 years minimum. Okay, so you have some sort of connection with the player, some emotional connection. By the time he's an NFL player, you're buying his jersey. I have never understood the dogma, the anti-college basketball vibe I get from the NBA. Those of us with a social life don't watch the G League. We don't watch it. So the bottom line is like next year, Cooper Flagg at Duke. I can't wait to watch him. At Duke, goes to the G League, I don't watch him. Goes overseas, I don't watch him. Most of us have a life. We're not going on YouTube to watch Euro video or G League video. So Cooper Flagg is going to go to Duke, is going to get connected with one of these shoe companies, and is absolutely going to move the television needle when he comes into the NBA, if he goes to a reasonable team. Like if remember, the worst team in the NBA generally doesn't win the lottery. If he goes to a team with some promising stars, it's the one thing I really like about the NIL in college is that I think it'll help college basketball. It makes college football just more of a top-heavy bidding war. It used to be a facilities issue. Now it's an NIL issue for the top teams. Not that many changes in the last 20 years in college football. You notice the Ohio States and the Georgias and the Texas and the big school, they have all the money too. LSU is going to outbid people for top players. But I do think the NIL in college basketball will keep the Kansas guy around, the UConn guy around, some of them for another year. So I have a stronger emotional connection than going into the NBA. I think it's a real thing. I mean, that's why Villanova guys may not be stars, but are really powerful in the NBA, because I watched them for 3 years in college. I know who Mikal Bridges is and Jalen Brunson is, and Dante DiVincenzo. I watched them in college. Josh Hart for years. So I have a little bit of a relationship. They don't even have to be stars in the NBA. I'm familiar with them. So I do think that the NBA is going through a very challenging time with all the European escalation to just more great players globally. I mean, the draft now is virtually, the NBA draft, the WNBA draft has players that can immediately, Caitlin Clark, immediately come in and be productive culture changers. NBA has none of those. It's crazy. I watched the NBA draft for 30 minutes. I'm like, I have no real opinion on any of these players outside of the Connecticut guys. So hopefully the NIL keeps a handful of 5 or 6 really high-end players. I mean, Zach Edey. I know who he is. I'm excited to watch him in the NBA. I don't know what he's going to be, but I'll watch him. Football has always understood that. Hopefully the NBA can figure it out. Something else I thought about on the sports side. So I recently got an email from a friend who said, what do you make of Paul Feinbaum? He's a radio broadcaster that covers mostly, well, the SEC, a lot of Bama talk, bashing Lincoln Riley and USC. He said he doesn't believe that Lincoln Riley, it's over. It's a sinking ship. Well, I think a lot of things about it. First of all, if I recall, Feinbaum was anti-Jim Harbaugh until the very, very end. So what? I mean, if you really, really don't think Jim Harbaugh, who had a successful NFL career, Nick Saban and Steve Spurrier in the SEC did not. If you don't think Jim Harbaugh can coach, what do you want me to say? I mean, sorry, he can. He's great everywhere. San Diego, Niners, Stanford, Michigan. He's going to be great here. I think people forget it took Harbaugh a long time because he inherited such a mess. He had to change the culture. Brady Hoke. I mean, that I can remember watching games at Michigan. There were 30,000 empty seats. People forget how bad USC was when Lincoln Riley took it over. They were 4-8, and Lincoln Riley told people, I mean, it was understood. 40 to 50 of the 80 players couldn't play. The roster was terrible. Now, he has the benefit of the transfer portal, which has been energized, but you can't create chemistry in a year. So if they beat Tulane and they led with about a minute to go, he would have gone from 4-8 to 12 wins with a really bad defensive staff and a really bad defensive roster. Pretty impressive, because his first 2 years in the Pac-12 have been the best the Pac-12's been in 20 years. And Caleb Williams and Lincoln Riley produced the number one offense in the country. Outside of Caleb Williams and Jordan Addison, any NFL guys of note, like college guys. That's it. That's pretty impressive. But I think this year's fascinating for USC. They get a bit of a break. UCLA and Michigan are in total rebuilds. They don't play the best two teams, Oregon and Ohio State. That's a huge break. LSU's probably a loss, but they have a capable defensive staff, upgrades in the secondary, won't be as good at quarterback, but it'll be a more Lincoln Riley-driven team, less of a Caleb Williams-driven team, which is not all bad. Caleb sort of, his last year morphed into it was a Caleb offense, not a Lincoln Riley offense. He'll kind of reclaim that. I think much like Harbaugh, people didn't understand how big the rebuild was at Michigan. People don't know how big the rebuild was for Brian Kelly. It wasn't until the last two games he played against Georgia. It wasn't that first time he got to the national championship. That was fool's gold. It took him 9 years. It took Harbaugh 7, 8 years to really get the quality of upper class talent, where Michigan could go toe to toe with Ohio State and in Georgia and in Alabama. This is the beginning for Lincoln Riley. This is the beginning. We forget Dabo Swinney at Football Centric Clemson. He needed like 3 years to get it going. People forget. Go to Nick Saban at LSU. It wasn't. They didn't hit it out of the park. Go to his 4th year at LSU. There were a lot of losses. Saban at Alabama, the number one football program in the country, made it look really easy. It's generally not, even with the transfer portal. It takes a lot of time, and USC was a wreck. So I think Lincoln Riley's going to be fine. The other thing that doesn't get discussed a lot, and it's totally legal, is that Phil Knight has basically said, as he ages, what do you need? And Oregon buys any Southern California football player out of high school they really want. They just buy him. And it's a little icky, but it's the reality of what Oregon does now. I'm not criticizing him for it. But as Phil Knight has aged, it's become very clear that he's going to spend whatever it takes in NIL. And USC's NIL program is not terrible. Their collective is about $12 million a year. But that's not what Oregon's spending, or Texas, or Georgia, or Ohio State. I don't know if USC or UCLA, but USC is the bigger brand, has the stomach for the NIL. This is not Norman, Oklahoma. It's not Auburn, Alabama. It doesn't drive discussion. People have lives. Even if you're a USC fan, you probably like the Rams and the Lakers and the Dodgers. There's a lot of options here. This is not a one-horse town. So do you have the stomach? Do the boosters have the stomach to keep putting millions of dollars into a program that wins 10 games and not national championships? When Pete Carroll was winning natties at USC, no NFL. Now there's two teams. There was no SoFi Stadium. The Dodgers were good. They weren't this consistently good. The Clippers were a mess. Now they're viable. MLS is in town. You know, Silicon Valley economy. People have more money, more options. They bail more quickly. So it's a different Los Angeles. Now you not only, until this year, pre-12 team playoff, you've got to win more games to get to the national championship. The Pac-12 is better now. So it's a much different game. I think Lincoln Riley is going to be okay. But this is not an elite NIL program right now. They have the best athletic director and the best guidance, Jen Cohen, they've ever had. I think Lincoln Riley's really smart, but Oregon's swooping in and buying the best players in the West Coast. Not to mention, Bama is still a big name. Ohio State and Michigan now seeping in, stealing top recruits. It's a big lift for USC. It's a really big lift. I think they'll be better than people think. But the idea that Lincoln was going to swoop in and they were going to win natties, this program was a tire fire. 4-8 with really no great players. First year, the two best players, Caleb Williams, Jordan Addison, both transfers. There just was not anything of note here. Bad O-lines, no interior, great defensive linemen. It was not USC. I will say this. When I have time to not be on the treadmill of sports, it gives me more time to read, which I love. And it gave me, and there's something about baseball where I like reading about baseball more than I generally like watching baseball, the exception being a great postseason matchup. But, you know, I'll go and I'll deep dive on baseball stats. And I think it's fascinating. And I used to be in my first job out of college was a baseball announcer. So, you kind of get into the statistical, the math of baseball. And I always kind of find it interesting is that baseball, because of its rich history, tends to be a little paralyzed by it, and they're slow to make moves. It is remarkable now to watch how few baseball players can hit. Only 12 current baseball players at last count hit over 300 in the whole sport. That's insane. It's Ohtani, it's Aaron Judge, it's Mookie Betts, big names you'd expect. But I think there is a solve to the problem because the game's faster now. The attendance is up. The ratings are slightly up. And I think the solve is to lower the mound, which baseball did in the late 60s. And that was sort of the Bob Gibson era. You just couldn't hit Gibson. So they lowered the mound like, I think, a half a foot. And I think baseball's always been so reluctant. It took them forever on replay or the pitch clock. It just takes them a long time because they're very much tied to their history. Lower the mound 6 inches. Give batters a shot. Because I will tell you, over the course of the 17 days I was gone and I flipped on the TV, the game moves very swiftly. I remember, and this happened when I lived in Connecticut. So my wife built a workout room downstairs. And that's where I would go every day. And that's where I would watch baseball, usually NESN or the Yes Network, Red Sox or Yankees. I got both on my cable service. And there was a moment in time, I remember, it was the Red Sox playing the Blue Jays in Toronto. And it was at like 5th or 6th inning. And I went down, and I usually do about a 45 to a 50-minute lift. That's it. Then I'm gone. And I remember this day in particular. It was like the 5th or 6th inning. And the Blue Jays, I think, were at the plate. And I did my workout, 45 minutes, and it was like the start of the 5th inning. And by the time I was done with my workout, it was just going to like the 6th. It had been like an inning and one batter that had lasted like 45 minutes. And I wouldn't have watched the game had I not worked out. But I remember thinking at the time, God, this is agony. This is painful that you can't, and hockey knows this, it's really hard to have a business with only diehards watching. You need casuals. I mean, my wife knows a little about the NFL. She's very much a sports casual, but she understands the NFL. She can name many of the teams and the star players. Is that baseball pre-pitch clock had no casuals, very few casuals. It's actually pretty fun to watch now if you get the right teams and the right matchups. But the hitters are overwhelmed. There are a lot of quick at bats. Now, for me, I don't have the patience with my iPhone to sit and watch 4-hour games. But if the quality and the energy, if I'm getting action, I'll stick around. No matter how fast a sport is, there's got to be action. And you can go through 3 innings and see a hit, a single. It's not enough action. And the way to solve it's pretty easy. Lower the mound 6-8 inches, give the batters a fighting chance, and it won't just be Shohei Ohtani and Aaron Judge that can hit. Something else that jumped out to me, and I don't talk a ton of politics, but I mean, Jesus, when I was gone for 17 days, all anybody talked about was the debate. You know, one of the things that is really interesting to me, and I've been offered political shows before on radio, and it's sort of a joy sapping experience. I like sports. I like the drama. I like waking up every day and there's a new game, a new drama, a new storyline, and you can build a new narrative. The idea of having to cover the same political story for 6 months on end, I think is just the thief of joy. I think it'd be tedious. I don't want that life. But it was really interesting. I had this discussion with a friend, and I said, politics and sports and business are all very similar. I mean, a political race, uh, it's a business. It's the minute you're elected, you're raising funds. And in my business, sports has always been a little political, and it's absolutely a business. That's why the NFL is pulled away from the other leagues. It just understands that. Is that it was fascinating to watch the coverage. We know Joe Biden has struggled, especially the last couple of years, with a lot of verbal gaffes, the staring, the look we've seen from grandparents we love. But it's been fascinating to watch not only the coverage, which I think has been very fair and even-handed, but the outrage by Democrats with the coverage of CNN, Jonathan Stewart and Brian Stetler and Chuck Todd and the New York Times. So my entire life, I've been sort of an independent that leans right on business and left on social issues. But I've always understood that over 70% of people in the media are Democrats, and it absolutely bleeds into the coverage. I think on average, Democrats get more favorable coverage than conservatives. Now, some of that's earned, like climate change denial on the right is doing you no favors. Like every week, there's a record in Palm Springs, Vegas, everywhere. The storms are getting nastier. The heat's getting more oppressive. So sometimes I do look at conservatives and roll my eyes when they come across often as anti-science. Be that as it may, I do think Democrats get more favorable coverage. But you can't trust, the White House doesn't have a lot of credibility right now anytime they talk about Biden. But what's fascinating has been to watch the Democrats, the liberal elites, react to the coverage. Once you start complaining about the coverage and not the content of your politician, which conservatives do a lot of, you're cooked. And I'm telling you, as an independent, I've appreciated CNN's coverage and Brian and Chuck Todd and Jonathan Stewart. I've actually appreciated it. I think it's been right down the middle. It has been appropriately harsh on Joe Biden. Listen, when you come out and you cover the White House and you say you're surprised by his lack of mental acuity, I can't take you seriously. Do you not have an iPhone? I can't take you seriously. And so watching kind of the liberal elites criticize the coverage is something that is painful and fatiguing. I've watched the right do for years. And it makes me think, as somebody who I view myself as an independent, I don't like Trump at all, but I view myself mostly as a political independent. It makes me think, when you get the favorable coverage, the favorable lean for years, you're overreacting. You're picking on the wrong people. The media is imperfect. We know that. Hasn't been a great year, I don't think, necessarily for the New York Times. It's not about the coverage. It's about the candidate and the problems. And listen, Joe Biden, if he refuses to step down, this is what you get. I don't think that's very promising. I don't think Donald Trump with more immunity from the Supreme Court is a great thing, but it's been fascinating to me to watch the attack of the coverage, which I view is incredibly fair, given the current state of Joe Biden. It feels fair to me. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't feel, as somebody in the media and somebody who's mostly moderate, left-leaner social, right-leaner fiscal, I don't feel it's been outrageous. Jake Tapper's asked hard questions. I do think the media, feeling they've been lied to, has a little chip on their shoulder, but that's okay. I can deal with a little of that, right? There's been a lot of chips on the shoulder of media for years. Sometimes they felt, in my opinion, a little dogmatic, a little unfair to the right. Now they're bringing the sledgehammer on Biden. It feels right to me. It feels appropriate. I think the simple explanation, what has happened to the Democrats, is that there is no more pressurized job in America than president. It ages you. And for an example, go look at President Barack Obama's inauguration and how youthful he looks. And look 8 years later. He has a head of gray hair. And he was in his prime politically. Joe Biden was always, by any reasonable measure, a one-term president with some cognitive decline apparent going into that one term. And the Democrats got caught flat-footed. You didn't really start to notice it until about late year 2 of his presidency. But the last 2 years, it's ugly and it's sad. And we've all seen this before. And the Democrats come off as ill-prepared and not prepared and getting caught flat-footed. It's not about the coverage. It's not about CNN. It's not about Bill Maher. It's about Joe Biden. It's a candidate issue, not a coverage issue.